This peace plan is not only a tragedy for Ukraine, but an immediate crisis for Britain, writes Daniel Hannan. Follow this channel, EcoChannel TV, for more updates on international news. Trump is behaving precisely as he would if he were a Russian asset. This peace plan is not only a tragedy for Ukraine, but an immediate crisis for Britain. These are not peace terms. They are the exactions that a victorious power wrings from a conquered rival. Limits on the size of the Ukrainian army, a ban on NATO membership, no Western troops on Ukrainian soil, no U.S. aircraft even in neighboring Poland, fresh elections to remove Volodymyr Zelensky. Russia will not disgorge a single grain of illicitly annexed soil. It will not even push its frontier to the existing front lines. No, it will actually be awarded territory currently held by Ukraine, formally extending its rule over the entirety of the Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts and acquiring some 250,000 new subjects. Luhansk, it is true, is already largely occupied by Russia, with Ukraine contesting only a handful of border villages. But the front line has run through Donetsk since the fighting began in 2014. Surrendering the Ukrainian-held portion would mean handing over the country's most important defensive emplacements, rather as Czechoslovakia was forced to relinquish its border forts in 1938. I don't much care for Second World War analogies, and I have not dragged Munich into a column before, but the parallels this time are hard to ignore. Russian speakers in the Donbass were stirred up precisely as the ethnic Germans in Czechoslovakia had been. Volodymyr Zelensky offered moderate territorial concessions to Putin at the beginning of the conflict, just as Edvard Beneš had suggested transferring several thousand square miles of Czech land to Germany. In both cases, the eventual deal was instead done by others over the carcass of the sacrificed nation. Just as Beneš resigned following the deal, so it seems unthinkable that Zelensky, already on the ropes after his autocratic response to corruption allegations, can cling on as president. We all know what happened after Munich. 6 months later, despite his talk of a full and final settlement of Germany's claims, Hitler occupied the rest of the rump Czech state, absorbing it into his realm as the protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia. Does Putin dream of one day recommencing hostilities with a mutilated Ukraine, by then forbidden by treaty to join the Western alliance? If he did launch further strikes, who would stop him? After Munich, Europe was under no further illusions about the threat that Hitler posed, and Chamberlain used the time he had bought to crank up aircraft production. Putin, by contrast, is to be welcomed back into the comedy of nations, his assets unfrozen, his country invited to turn the G7 into the G8, a status justified neither by the size of Russia's economy nor by the state of its democracy. Perhaps Ukrainians, exhausted and demoralized, will accept these terms as the starting point of armistice negotiations. The alternatives, after all, are unappealing. They could struggle on without U.S. arms and ammunition, while European nations ransacked their already bare shelves to make up some of the shortfall. But they will not be able to survive the withdrawal of American intelligence sharing and satellite data, on which they depend for strike targeting, early warning, and reconnaissance. Trump switched off the intelligence in March but restored it a week later under pressure from his generals and his then National Security Advisor, the impressive former Special Forces officer Mike Waltz. Terrifyingly, the civilian and military officials who advised against the switch-off have since been moved, and the next withdrawal would be permanent. So much, by the way, for the notion that the U.S. is simply being non-interventionist or parsimonious, that its sole concern is avoiding the cost of wars. Sharing intelligence costs almost nothing.